this is McLaughlin. This is week 9 of my course, aka advertisement week. One of the last genre weeks we have. This week we kind of looked overall at advertisement. It's my advertisements and how they're made, tips and tricks. And we made 4 adverts. This is the most unique week compared to the other weeks because it wasn't based on a film genre. It was based on a advertisement. It wasn't really a genre. It's kind of more of a style filmmaking, and obviously the outcomes were very different. Just before we get into the specific days, my setup here is slightly changed. You might know previously from the other videos I used a mic. I used a microphone, a separate microphone to my camera to kind of improve the audio. The reason I'm not using that now is just basically because the videos are getting quite long because I'm going very in depth. They're getting about 20 minutes is kind of where they're roughly full now, is that the SD actually transfers into about 2 to 3 clips, and that's fine if the audio is synced up with the clips because it works out alright. But because the audio is not synced with the camera, the microphone that I previously used, there's always a bit of a slight delay, and it creates problems. And also, it's just easier to do it this way. So that's the new setup. Also, I'm filming this at night to try and sort out the green screen issues. The green screen not looking good. So basically, I've got a light here, and a light here, and this should sort out the green screen issues. So just, you know, that's where I'm at. Let's just get into the first day, and that was Wednesday. Okay, so Wednesday started off with a little bit of a kind of warm-up activity. This was looking at lower thirds. Lower thirds are basically a thing at the bottom of the screen. I'll put on one now that basically says the name and like kind of like the job position or whatever. You see a lot in like TV series and more like, you know, morning shows and stuff like that. It's just a simple way to communicate who these people are. The reason why we've done it is because the serious studio that is a part of our college recently got the ability to use lower thirds, so we kind of just got some experience with lower thirds. That was just kind of a quick warm-up activity. So to get into the actual kind of what we actually done, you know, the actual activities, one of the first thing we've done was looking at TV adverts. The idea being that, you know, we would break them down kind of, we looked at 3 TV adverts. So what we done was we looked at the camera, the editing, kind of graphics and stuff like that. To kind of get like a good basis on how they make TV adverts. I looked at a Tesla advert, so I'm just getting my website up. I looked at a Tesla advert, an IKEA advert, and a Skittles advert that kind of covered all bases, I think. I think I've done really well in this activity. I think one of the biggest things that's coming out the weeks as we go along is I'm getting very good at sourcing. I really tried to put up my game of sourcing and stuff like that to really kind of improve my overall sourcing for my projects, because I think sourcing, as I talked about last week, was one of the things that they said to kind of improve upon. So I've really tried to improve upon that sourcing, and I think this is a good example of it. I've sourced quite a lot, you know. I've talked to, you know, I've added in those sources of that, and the work is pretty well detailed. I've really kind of gone over the adverts and gone over every single aspect of it. So that was the 3 TV adverts breakdown. Next we kind of done audience researching. So this was looking at basically understanding how audiences kind of work. So audience targeting, how they choose a primary audience and a secondary audience, that kind of idea. I think this was really interesting. It really helped me understand adverts better, because there's a lot more kind of study into adverts than just families. There's demographics, there's kind of tracking how people buy and sell and stuff like that, and it was really interesting. It really helped with my adverts, as when you'll see on Friday, is I really went with the mindset of, is there an audience for this product? Who do the audience be? Are they kind of, you know, do they fit into these categories and stuff like that? We done a lot of written tasks on this day because it was a really big written task. We looked into Ofcom and Acer, who are basically the 2 companies who basically manage the adverts and stuff like that. So they approved them, and also you can send in complaints about adverts, and they'll kind of take in those complaints, review the advert, and maybe take them down. So basically what we done was I looked at 2 adverts, one banned by Ofcom, one banned by Acer, and kind of worked out why they were banned and kind of looked at the laws. This was a pretty complex task. It turned into a pretty complex task because I actually had to go into the actual laws that are very, you know, the laws, so they're very kind of detailed and stuff like that. There's a lot of them, and it was pretty interesting understanding how, like, what's allowed on TV, what's not allowed, and how they've very much, Ofcom especially, very much changed with the times. They've added newer laws and stuff like that, and the two main adverts I looked at was a Iron Brew advert that got a lot of complaints about transphobia, and it was a Swiss cheese advert that was kind of banned because it was kind of sexist towards men. And I think it was really interesting why they banned it and stuff like that, and really understanding the logistics of the company. And then finally we done an advert case study. So previously I've talked about this a lot. We done a director case study. This is where we looked at a director who's pretty prominent in that genre, you know, for example Ridley Scott for sci-fi, George Lucas or whatever, you know, and really understood their work and like broke them down. Because adverts don't really have a director, we looked at a company's brand and how they kind of the same kind of idea of how do they create that brand and stuff like that. So I looked at Kellogg's because I wanted to do a company that had a clear kind of target audience and brand to them. I think Kellogg's is a good example of it, very much for family demographic. So what I'd done was basically I looked into the company and kind of like done research into them, looked at the adverts, really understood who they're targeting, looked at feedback and stuff like that. And this leads into the main, I think, advantage this week over other weeks is I really linked all the work together, so it feels less, because I think previously I've looked back on my work, is that it feels a bit, you know, clunky how it's put together. It feels just you know, one part and then one part, they're not really connected. Whereas I think it all came together in the Kellogg's case study, because I started talking about, you know, for example, I started talking about how the audience research on how they used it, and how they had Ofcom and Acer, how they kind of played into it, and how they abide by the rules of Ofcom that I previously researched into, and kind of using those free TV adverts breakdown is how they use the cinematography and really understood the adverts. So I think it really helped lead up to that kind of big advertising case study, whereas previous some of my work was less linked. So I say that's the biggest advantage of that day, is kind of everything came together really well. On the other side, I think the biggest disadvantage, looking back on my work and looking at these three sections, is the Ofcom and Acer research felt very weak. I think it done the point of, you know, looking into laws and stuff like that, but I think I really could have done more adverts and really kind of picked more adverts that were more kind of controversial or like more kind of on the line of, you know, really showed off different rules, because the adverts I chose did get banned from Ofcom and Acer, but they only really broke one rule, and it didn't really allow me to explore all the rules that Ofcom and Acer have. So I think if I chose an advert that was more kind of, I think, controversial, or like had more rules breaking, or more on that borderline showed off, and allowed me to kind of look at public reactions to kind of Ofcom and Acer and really understand them more as a company, and I really understand the spirit of them and really understand the context of those adverts, and like what the people's reaction was. I think it would I think it would have been a lot better. So that's one of those things I think I really need to keep in mind in next time, is kind of really going into it and really kind of going, how can I run with this and make it look better. But I think for like a small task, it worked pretty well. Next we're going into the Thursday, and this was kind of a bit more research and kind of starting the planning, as we didn't really do much experimentation this week. Okay, Thursday, we started doing an advert breakdown. This is when we looked at three types of adverts. So, like, for example, I looked at food, drink, and technology, especially looking at phones, and how they advertise them. This was similar to the free ad breakdowns we've done previously, where we looked at free adverts, but the biggest difference to this one is we're looking at tips and tricks. So this is how they make the adverts look better. For example, cereal adverts, instead of using milk that, you know, is a liquid that's kind of very difficult to manage and stuff like that, doesn't look that good on screen, they use glue, because then you can, you know, make it look nice with the cereal and stuff like that. And that's something I actually use for my Cheerio adverts. And I think this is really interesting, because this really went into more of the logistics, how they make an advert, the kind of tips and tricks, and really looking at, and also the research side. I really went into, like, I watched a lot of videos that showed how, like, they put together the adverts, and like it's really interesting. Second thing we've done was the planning for the adverts. So we're doing 4 adverts. We're doing a beer advert, 0% beer, a wine advert, a cereal advert that I previously mentioned. This time I think it was Cheerios, and then we could pick our own. I decided to do an aftershave, because I think that's a very common advert practice, and you see a lot of aftershave adverts. I think it's a good product to kind of advertise, and also I did have aftershave. So I think the planning, I would say is the biggest disadvantage of this session, because I think my planning, it worked in the context of understanding the advert and, like, you know, doing an advert, but I thought it could be more creative. Because I think the biggest thing was, once I realised this once I actually finished all 4 adverts, was 3 out of the 4 adverts end with just a thing coming in frame that I think isn't very creative. I think I could have spent more time I think the problems from the start were the planning. I think if I went for more of a creative, kind of more creative planning segment that really kind of embraced that creativity, that I think really shone throughout the last projects, it really would have been better. So I think I just got blinded by advertisements being so serious that I should have been a bit more creative, a bit more dynamic with the kind of shots and kind of cinematography I used. But overall, I think the planning was decent for where it was. It's very basic and it does work, but I think I really need to improve on it. But on the other side, the advantage was that I really understood the different aspects of. I really understood talking about the three kind of products. I really understood different aspects of them and how they advertise them, and I think that was my biggest advantage, was the research I went into it. So I looked at a lot of different videos of how they done them, especially the food products, because they had the most videos on them. The technology one was a bit more difficult, I admit, because technology doesn't really have many behind the scene adverts, but I think I really understood how they done all like the kind of tips and tricks, and really understood how to implement them pretty well. Because not to go into Friday yet, but I think Friday, one of the biggest advantages, one of the things I've done really well, was kind of using the tips and tricks I learned here and really pushing them into the further projects. So I think that's one of the biggest advantages of the written side. Just before we get into Friday, I just want to talk about a thing I do with the college. It's kind of a work placement thing. I help out with Seriously Good TV. They do a live show. It's a live show every week. I've been trying to help out a lot more, as I think I've talked about in a previous reflector vlog. I'm trying to help out a lot more as I move on my schedule, and basically I've started help out in the live show. I previously edited them. I edited a massive debate. I think I talked about this last week, but I edited a massive debate that was about 40 minutes long, and that was really difficult. But this week I kind of helped out with the live show. So I had a pretty simple job in the live show, but it's one of those important jobs. I basically queued up the auto cue screen. So you know how you see there's a lot in behind the scenes productions of live TV shows, live TV series, live shows, where you have a person read from an auto cue, and this is basically a long kind of text call that comes out and doesn't read it, and I basically stops and started and managed the speed of it. I think it was pretty interesting because I got to see more behind the scenes stuff like that, and it's something that I'm definitely going to help out more with. Is Seriously Good TV's like live performances. And I hope my plan is basically to do different facets of it. You know, do camera work, do the control room, do mics and stuff like that, and really understand the whole industry much better through this. So that was Thursday. Overall, a pretty decent day, I would say, but the issues with the planning do stretch over to Friday, and I think lead to my adverts not being the best. So let's just go into Friday, where I filmed and made the adverts. Okay, so Friday was where I filmed and edited all 4 of the adverts. I would say one of the biggest things about Friday, and it was a very kind of challenging day, one of my biggest advantages of Friday was how I really did embrace practical effects. You might notice throughout my previous videos, especially in year 1, I rely a lot on edited effects. These are kind of where I take the raw footage, add overlays, add filters and stuff like that. I don't really rely on practical effects because I'm an editor. I'm specialising in editing. It's something I really want to nail down. But I think it is always good to understand practical effects, because I'm of the opinion that practical effects do a lot better. And this was the first project that allowed us to kind of embrace practical effects. So, for example, this Cheerios advert, I'll show some of the footage now, but that Cheerio isn't actually milk, it's glue. So what I basically done was I took a normal bowl, I filled it with glue and then put the Cheerios on top. And I think that really looks better than, doing it in the edit or just using normal milk. So I think that was one of my biggest advantages. before I get into the disadvantages, I'm going to start doing my usual problem-solving corner.
It's Brendan's problem-solving corner.
Okay, so the first problem I had was that the products we had, the 3 out of the 4 products, so I brought my own for the 4th product, was being shared around people, and there's about 16 people in my class, so that's 16 people need to use the product. 3 products, that means 3 people can only do it once, so basically it's one of those things where you kind of had to do quick with the products, and that was the issue, was that I didn't really have that long with the products, or it was sometimes difficult to do it. And how I worked around this issue was basically I did a lot more planning, and I worked on other college work while I waited for those products, and when I had the opportunity to do the products, I kind of really was quick with it and understood all the shots I wanted to do. I think that's the most important thing, especially when you're working in the industry. When you have limited time to do something, or limited time to use, say, a studio or a certain prop, you really need to plan around it and really plan before you start on the prop. So basically, the problem was that we had a limited amount of time with the products, but the solution was basically kind of planning and stuff like that. The second problem was this time I was using lights. One of the adverts, the Budweiser advert, involved a blue light. The lights I'm using were kind of really tricky to manage. One of my biggest things, I talk about this quite a lot, but one of my biggest things, I don't really light that well in my scenes because I'm not the best with lights. I just find it very confusing, one of my biggest disadvantages. So I did find this very confusing to manage this kind of light, because the light is kind of very tricky. The original light I was using actually broke because the batteries weren't working, so I had to swap the light out. I used a blue filter, that blue filter kind of came off and stuff like that. The solution was this kind of, it was one of those situations where you kind of just have to spend your time really understanding the equipment and stuff like that, and now that I understand it, I think in my next shoots, over time, the more I use these lights, the quicker I get with it. So the problem was the lights were difficult to manage. The solution was kind of just taking your time and really understanding the product. For the third disadvantage was, I talked about this previously with the cereal. It took me actually quite a lot of time to really understand how to perfectly nail that cereal. I got the glue in the bowl fine, but because that's easy. But it's really perfectly working out how to put that cereal in the best way it can. One of the interesting ones was basically, because we only had one bowl, I actually done the cereal bowl for all the adverts because I was the first person to do cereal. So I really wanted to nail down that cereal so it looked best for everyone. So I spent a lot of time kind of working out the angles and working out how to make that look realistic. So the problem I had was, cereal took a while. The solution was just really understanding it and just really, getting how to do it. Another fourth one, this is a bit bigger than the last ones, more smaller disadvantages. One of the adverts, I actually didn't get all the footage I needed. I think this was the aftershave advert. I think it's a bit eminent. You can see this a bit more in the aftershave advert video. Basically what happened was, we don't really have that much time to film and stuff like that. As I talked about, we had limited time with the products and stuff like that. And I just kind of forgot to film the footage. So basically how I kind of worked around this was, during the edit I cut a lot of footage around and stuff like that, and really kind of best I could bear it shoved into my planning. And the kind of solution to this isn't really a solution, it's more like, it's kind of working with what you got. But now I've learned a lesson where I really need to, I think next time when I do my pick your own week, I'll have the shot list and I'll tick them off, because then it's like, oh, I got all the shots there because I've ticked them off. So that's something, it's a problem, and it's one of those things where I can't go back in time and fix it, but I can learn from the mistake, and next time, make a shot list and tick them off. My fifth problem was the batteries run out quite a lot. This is actually a problem that just happened with the reflective log. Luckily, I do segments. Is the batteries I have kind of run out very quickly, and basically what happened was the day before the shoot I forgot to record to charge up all 3 of my batteries. So what normally I do before a shoot day is I have 3 batteries, 1 in the camera, 2 spares, and I charge them to 100%. His problem was because I forgot to charge 2 of the batteries. I can only have the 1 full one that ran out, and then the other 2's ran out. So basically I had to spend a lot of time charging them, and then this led on to a knock-on effect of the previous problem I had where I ran out of time. And the kind of only solution to this is kind of working out the shots a lot quicker. That's what I basically done, was kind of, before I turned the camera on, having all the shots planned out and working out that a lot quicker. And then next time, just learning from that mistake, just before shoots, always going through like a mental checklist, being like, oh, the battery charge, things like that. So, and then the sixth problem, this is going to the editing. The biggest thing with these 4 projects was color grading. So color grading is basically where you kind of change the color of it. I think I talked about this last week. So one of the adverts I'll show you was in black and white. So I'll make myself black and white. So you can see I'm in black and white now. Basically, color grading is very tricky, especially when it comes to not black and white. Black and white is pretty simple, but the other color grading, especially I think the wine advert suffered the most from this problem, where it looks a little bit too weird. It looks too bright. It's an effect I was going for, that more classy effect and stuff like that. But I don't think the color grade came off very well. And I think it's something that I really need to work on, especially as I'm doing editing as my specialism. So basically the solution to this problem is more just kind of understanding the program more and just taking your time instead of trying to rush, through it. So as I previously talked about, I left the disadvantages to the risk, the problem solving section, because the disadvantage this week I think was the color grading, and the color grading wasn't as strong as it could have been. I think it looks alright most of them, but I think the wine advert does massively suffer from that weak color grading. So I say the big disadvantage this week was this day was the color grading, something I really need to improve on. Next week I'll choose your own week. I have really a mental idea of what I want to do, and one of the biggest parts of it will be the colour grading, so I'm really hoping I nail down that colour grading. So let's just get into the usual kind of overall wrap up where I look at targets and all that. Okay, so overall I thought this was actually a really interesting and decent week. This was the most unique week out of all the weeks I've had so far, especially for a John week, because all the other weeks kind of like make a film and stuff like this, whereas advertising is such its own unique genre, even art style some would say, that it really led me more creative routes. And obviously this week I made 4 adverts that were aimed to be plotless, whereas the other ones other films I've made are more very plot heavy. So I think it really taught me a lot more different unique skills, taught me a lot more practical skills, and really kind of working on that deadline. I would say overall my advantage this week was my written work. I think my written work is, as you can see from my previous reflect log, I'm always talking about how good my written work is. I think it's getting better and better. I think the biggest thing this week was linking it all together so it had a purpose, especially during the project. Because I talked about, say for example, I talked about tips and tricks. One was the serial, and I actually use those tips and tricks in my video. So it feels like the whole page of advertising week is really just coming together instead of it all feeling like separate units. So I'd say my biggest disadvantage. Biggest advantage, sorry. I'd say on the other side, my biggest disadvantage was the planning. I felt my videos did feel a bit weak, and this can all go back to the planning. I felt my planning was decent and it was serviceable, but it wasn't very creative. And I feel like my other projects were very kind of more creative and stuff like that, but I was kind of limited by, normally I think creatively by the plot, but I could have been a bit more creative in my camera movement. I think it's something I'm definitely going to take over to pick your own week next week. Well, I'll be making a kind of a thriller, I've decided. I really want to get more dynamic camera work and really think about shots and really what does the camera mean and how it can be more interesting in it. So my target for next week, as I said, is choose your own week. I want to try and be much more creative, especially with my camera work. I really want to try and get more unique shots and really think better about the camera work I'm putting into my video, because I think looking back on these adverts is I had the opportunity to use more unique camera work, and I think some of the shots were pretty good. I think some of the pan shots were pretty unique and interesting, but I don't think overall it worked, and I think I could be more creative with my planning with my camera work. Let's just go on to target review. So last week's target, that was from Surrealism Week. No, not Surrealism Week, sorry, Sci-Fi/Horror Week. This was thinking that I thought to Loot Picture. I'll review this target. I'm kind of mixed on if I met this target or not. I would say that on my written side, I think I met this target because I really thought that the loot aspects, and as I previously mentioned, I really linked them together and stuff like this. But on the other side, my planning was very weak, and as I mentioned in the problem solving corner, I forgot a couple of shots during for I think the aftershave advert, and I would count that under like the Loot Picture bracket. So I think that is something I still need to improve upon, and something I will be kind of thinking about. When I do next week is always thinking about a Loot Picture and also thinking about the target, as I previously mentioned, that is trying to be more creative. So that was advertisement week. As I previously mentioned, I think it was a pretty good week. I have my sips and trawls, and I think I'm starting to really know where I need to focus on more. It's not the written word, more the creative side. And I think that's the next week is the perfect opportunity. It is pick your own week, where you can do whatever week you want based on the genre we've done. I'm thinking of doing a thriller. Thanks for watching.